we can continue.
So, thank you, Vinod. Thank you for your introduction. And, good evening, everyone. So, first, I would like to thank Rohan and team for providing this opportunity to do some mutual understanding about the Sitecore Docker. It's about the afterlife of Sitecore Docker. And for the next slide, please. So, as already Vinod given introduction about us, so myself, Prabhu Ranganathan, working as a Sitecore architect. I have more than 12 years of experience in the IT industry, and last 8 years I'm actively working on Sitecore projects. So you can find me in LinkedIn, Prabhu Ranganathan, and I'm frequently writing a blogs in Medium platform. So you can even find me there as Prabhu.Ranganathan. And Gowthamaraja Eswaramoorthy is working as a Sitecore lead. He is having more than 7 years experience, and all 7 years he is actively working on Sitecore projects. So you can find him in LinkedIn profile Gowthamaraja Eswaramoorthy, and he has their own blogging website called sitecoreknowledgebase.com. In case if you have any helps or queries, please reach out us. And today's topic is afterlife of Sitecore Docker. So in current trend, we mostly started working on many Sitecore Docker materials. Even many of them started working on some real-time projects in Sitecore Docker. It has a lot of blogs which are having the information about what is Docker and how it is, how the Sitecore Docker works and how to install Sitecore Docker, Sitecore and Docker. There are many materials are available over the internet right now, and but when we are getting to the real work, I mean, once we all set to work with Sitecore and Docker, we will be facing many issues, right? Most of the things are new for us. Um, some conventional approaches in Sitecore may not work in Docker containers when we have Sitecore on that. So we'll pick one on that, and we'll see how to resolve that. I mean, that's how the session goes today. So some taking one real-time example about the issue currently we are facing, which is working exactly fine in conventional Sitecore approach, and we'll try to diagnose that and what is the way to fix that. So we'll show you a small demo on that. That's our key agenda on this entire session. So the discussion about today is before can you go back? Yeah. So the discussion about today is before get into the real demo. Um, so we are going to touch some basic concepts of Docker and its terminologies and how it's working in Sitecore. Uh, so what is Docker and why? Some basic things, Docker terminologies and Docker commands, and what is Sitecore Docker setup. Just to take a look at the overview of Sitecore Docker setup. We're not going to show any Sitecore installation on Docker demo and all, just to show up how the Docker setup, just to see the overview on that and how the developers life in Sitecore Docker. And after that, we will get into the real issue of afterlife of Sitecore Docker as a demo. And then we have any questions and answers on the session at the last. So the next thing is, so what is Docker? So I mean, many of them may know about it since everyone started talking about and started working about Docker and how it works and what is the background and how to implement Sitecore on that and many things. Many of them may know about it, but the key factor I'm putting that in some basic information here is it's for a few of them still may not know about it, and even some of them will start working on that, but they may not know the background of it. So how it actually works and how we have to structurize the Docker containers. So those things, even some of them may not know about it. So I just wanted to go through on that before we are getting into the real issue. So when we are coming into the Docker, so what is Docker in the sense? It is actually an open source project which is introduced in 2013. And when we are telling about Docker, um, it's a kind of a game-changing technology, I would say. It actually lets you build, ship, and run applications in a super efficient way. So I think what makes Docker so special. So when we are coming into Docker part, we can imagine like so. For example, if there is a magical container, so that packages your application along with all its dependencies and libraries and configurations. So we are writing a lot of codes and dependency libraries, and we have many configurations, and when we are going, I mean, all we are doing in a developer environment, and which is working incredibly um, awesome. And but when we are going to deploy that in production environment, that is a real headache for us, which is coming. But just to avoid that, if there is some container which actually helps us to package our complete application along with all our dependencies and libraries and configurations, and making it easy to deploy that and run consistently on any environment. So that's actually the Docker. So Docker, it's actually helps us to uh, in many ways in deploying our application, whatever the working version of any application in any environment, it actually ships and build and deploy that into the respective environments. So because of that, it actually helps the developers and teams save time. So in a lot of time got saved, and it actually streamline the workflows and ensures that your application behaves the same way everywhere. So wherever, even it is in dev or in stage or production, wherever it is, it works in the same manner. So whether you are a developer or a system admin or anyone in the software world, so Docker is a powerful tool you will definitely want in your toolbox. Um, so the main motto of this Docker is build once and run anywhere. So once you build that, you can ship that and deploy that and run it in anywhere. It has a few alternatives called BuildKit and Azure Kubernetes, LXD and Podman. Even few of the alternatives you could hear about already. So in coming to the Sitecore field, for the development purpose, we are using the Docker, and while going for a cloud deployment, I think mostly everyone is preferring to go with AKS called Azure Kubernetes Services. So that's all about Docker and its basic information. And so when it is coming to the why part, uh, why Docker? Um, Pratham, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So why Docker? Uh, yeah, everyone knows about why we are preferring the Docker. The main part is everyone facing the same issue, like right. So we create the application, and it's working fine in our environment, and when we are deploying that, all the uh, codes and libraries into the test environment or production environment, and let them testing on that application, and they start giving some adding some bugs, and that cannot be reproducible in our local environment, and all we should say is it is working fine in our environment. So only the many of them may say like it's a kind of an environment issue, so it's working fine in development environment. It's my machine, it's working fine. When we're deploying that into any other environment, some dependencies may fail over there, and um, we got some issues over there. And that was, I mean, that was keep hitting us in many ways. And sometimes we were forced to fix that at any cost. We are finding some workarounds, or we are sitting day and night to fix the find the cause of the issue. So these are all the main reasons, main issues we were facing in the earlier stages when we are having a different set of environments. And when we are going with a virtual machines, instead of having a Docker containers, when we are going with a virtual machines, it has another kind of an issue, right? So virtual machine has their own operating system and takes their own real estate space. So that is another concern. And the compatibility. So it's the how Docker works in the backend is it's a separated containers. Everything is a identity containers. So it is very compatibility and it has their own inbuilt microservices. I mean, whatever the containers we're creating, it actually in the backend it supports microservices. And so in case if you're creating any microservices oriented application, going with the Docker is pretty easiest way. So I mean, it has many reasons behind that, and what I'm seeing three major reasons we are going with the Docker is these three. Um, so when we are coming into the Docker world, so we are just we are taking the build of a working version and deploying that into any environment. So mostly that resolves all kind of problems that we are facing when stress testing that and finding some environment issues. And in coming to the space part, it's very lightweight and it is taking not much space and it is taking the machine's kernel. It's not having its own operating system. Instead of that, it's taking the machine's kernel as an operating system. So these are all the main reasons we would like to go with Docker. And the next part is some Docker terminologies. So we'll talk about some Docker terminologies here. Uh, So when coming into the Docker world, we frequently hearing few things that is called Docker terminology. It's called Docker file, images, containers, and Docker hub registry. So these are the words. These are the terminology words we frequently hearing that, and some many of them may know about it, and some of them may have a confusion on that. So, what is Docker file, and what is Docker image, and what is containers, and what is registry? So, when coming into the Docker file, so so think of a Docker file as a recipe or set of instruction to create a specialized container for your application. So it's a plain text file that contains all the commands needed to build your application environment. So you can define what operating system and what dependencies and what configurations and what files are required to create your image. So the Docker file acts as a blueprint for Docker to follow when creating your application environment. So if you would like to create any containers, any environments, so the starting point is Docker file. You have to create your Docker file. That is your first step. You have to do it. So when you are start doing the Docker file, so you have to mention. So what are all the things you have to include? Um, say either what kind of operating system and what kind of configurations and whatnot. So what are the important features you want to include? Everything you have to include that in Docker file. So that's why it is a starting point of any containerization path. And the next thing is Docker image. So Docker image, it's once you have your Docker file ready. So what you can do is you can use that Docker file and create a Docker image. So based on the Docker file, so what are the configurations you have mentioned in the Docker file? Based on that, you can build a Docker image. So this Docker image is actually a lightweight, standalone, and executable package that included your application along with all its dependencies and configurations. So what are the things you had mentioned in the Docker file? So everything um, which includes in your application, whatever the application you have to include, everything you can mention that in Docker file. Based on that, it gets created as a Docker image. So well, we could say it's like a snapshot of your application and its environment at a specific point in time. So Docker images are portable, and that means you can run them on any machine that has Docker installed. So making application deployment consistent and it's very easy to handle it. So the next part is containers. So when you have a Docker file which has all the list of configurations and all the dependencies you mentioned over there, from there you creating a Docker image from a Docker file. So once the Docker image is ready, so which is ready to deploy it anywhere, and the next part is deploying that. So containers are the actual runtime instance of Docker images. So you build the image and the running instance is called containers. So uh, so imagine then as an isolated self-contained virtual environment for your application. So what you could say is that it's an isolated and self-contained. That's a very important feature in Docker. Self-contained application, virtual environment for your application. So when you run a Docker image, it creates a container based on that image. So when you, so you create a Docker image and you are trying to execute that image, it creates a container based on the image, whatever you have configured. And so it's a very lightweight and fast and share the host machine's operating system kernel. So it's not required its own operating system. Instead of that, it takes the host machine's operating system kernel, which makes them highly efficient, right? So they isolate your application from the host and other containers, ensuring a secure and predictable environment for your application to run. So it actually isolates. So every container is isolated. So that's why it's very secure, and that's why we could go with the containers, because we don't need to have a specific OS for that or OS for that, and it's a very isolated one and very secure one. So and the last part here is Docker Hub registry. It's like a GitHub or any version control that we are currently using. So the same way for it's for Dockers. So it has some pre-built images. So it's a kind of an online marketplace. That's what I could say. It has a cloud-based registry where you can find and store and share a Docker images with the community or anything with your team. So it has a pre-built and ready-to-use images for various application services. For example, Sitecore has their own Sitecore images. So based on that, we are taking all that and creating the Sitecore environments in Docker. The same way, even you could create some images and you can upload it over there and sharing with our community. So for that, which is having the Docker Hub registry. So all these are all the actual Docker terminologies. So the basic is starting point here is Docker file. With that Docker file, all the configurations and setup you mentioned, based on that you can create a Docker image. And once you create a Docker image, you can uh, run the Docker image, that is called containers. So the running instances is called containers. So containers is actually the running instance of whatever we have mentioned the Docker image. And in case I want my co-developer has to use the same containers. So I have already set up all the Sitecore. For example, in Sitecore world, I installed Sitecore. On top of that, I have created on the respective applications and creating the entire set as an image. And I'm sharing that image into my co-developer. So they what they have to do is they just download that, and based on that image they can spin it up and start using that image as a container, and that container has all the in Sitecore part and application part, everything in it. Everything is already readily available over there. So that's why we have to use any Sitecore Docker registry. So just collaborate with the community or co-developer. So these are all the key points in Docker terminology. And the next word, some Docker commands. We will talk about some basic Sitecore Docker commands that we will be keep using in our Sitecore world. So Docker compose up -d. It's actually to create and start the containers. So this creates and run containers for all services that you have defined in your compose configuration. So I think we have one more file called Docker Compose. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the session. So when you run this command Docker Compose up and D, what it will do is what are the things you have mentioned in the Docker Compose file. Based on that, it will start creating containers. And Docker Compose stop is actually helps us to stop the containers, and it does not remove the container. So there are um, two different term here. One is stop. Stop is actually just to stop the containers, not to remove the container. And Docker Compose start is for starting the previously stopped containers. In case for some reasons we have stopped a list of containers, and if you have to start the container, you can use this command. And restart all stopped and running containers. And down, there is another command called Docker Compose down. So this actually stops the containers and remove the specific volumes. So that is the important point here. There is a difference in between stop and down. You have to very cautiously handle these commands when you are doing it. And in there is a ps command that is actually list the name of the services and stuff. The what are the containers? I mean, it actually lists out the services which are running right now. So that you can run the ps command and you can view it. And Docker Compose build is actually builds and create the images. So when you have a Docker file and you want to convert that into images, you can use this. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So the next one is build-d. So it's actually rebuilds the containers. So there are two different part here. So when there is a Docker Compose rebuild and Docker file rebuild. So Docker file rebuild in the sense the entire image has to change. So for example, you have an image, but you do some changes on that image, and you want that changes to be impacted. What you have to do is you have to rebuild that image. So that is one part. And Docker composes when you make some changes in Docker compose file, and you want to rebuild that, you don't need to actually you don't need to run the rebuild command. Instead of that, you just Docker compose down and up will be sufficient to make that impact included in your containers. And the rest of the things, there is a log in order to view the logs, you can see it. And prune is another command to remove the unwanted resources. And the same way, list out all the containers and stop the containers, you can use rm command. So these are the basic commands we usually work with when we are working with Sitecore. We frequently use these commands. Other than that, there are a list of commands available in Docker. You can even go and take a look at that in the below link I have given. And so once you install the Sitecore in Docker, and you are all set to start your development over there. So it has, when you coming into the Sitecore Docker setup overview, so you can even download the some default image repositories in GitHub. So it has some default folder structure. When you are creating a Docker based project, it has a default structure, which is having a list of predefined files. So we'll talk about that. So as I said earlier, there is a file called Docker file. So this has all the information about, so what are the things we have to include when we are creating an image. So all these informations will be available in the Docker file. So the next thing is an env file. So the env file is called env file is a simple text file commonly used in software development to store configuration parameters and environment variables for an application. So the name env itself stands for environment. So it's of so it has to be placed in the root directory of any project. So it actually within the environment file, everything is in the form of key value. So even when you are mentioning the database or API key, anything, you have to mention that in the key value combination. So that is an important factor when you are writing a when you're configuring the env file. And so the env file is actually having the sensitive information, like it has some environment information, some API key information. So most of the time, we have to keep in env file outside of the version control repositories. So developer has to create their own env file and customize that. That would be the preferred one. So since it has more sensitive and secure information. And the next one is Docker compose.yml. So this is actually the important topic. When you create the Docker image, and you can using that Docker image, you can create containers that we all know it. And so I'm setting up an environment. So for example, in Sitecore, so I'm setting up an environment. So when we are running a one command which creates all the necessary services. For example, CM is a kind of a service, identity server is a kind of a service, Xconnect is a kind of a service. So when I am running a single command, all all the containers are up and started working. So in that case, what we would do is we can create one Docker compose.yml file and mentioning everything as a services. So all the images we created, for example, for the CM, Sitecore has created the separate image for CM and SQL and an identity server and any other services. He created as a separate images, and he combined everything in a single Docker compose file. And when we are running this Docker compose file, it creates all the containers. So it's actually having the multiple container. So it actually holds a multiple container, multiple images will actually helps us to maintain the multi-container concept. That's the main important feature of Docker compose YML file. And another thing is Docker compose.override.yml file. So this is actually helps actually it mainly helps for developers. For example, in a Sitecore field, in Sitecore world, we downloaded the existing images from Sitecore repository and setting up the Sitecore environment. On top of that, we are installing all our creating our applications. So either it would be a Sitecore or CodeQuest, whatever it is, we are creating a Sitecore application, and then we'll have to ship that into any other environment. So we had to include all our application information. So we have to create the specific images for that and all, right. So for that, what we could do is we can mention all those information inside Docker compose override YAML file. So in the backend, it automatically incorporated with the primary Docker compose file and creating the application containers along with that application informations along with that as well. And the next part is so developers life and Sitecore developers life. So when you're coming into the Sitecore part, as I mentioned earlier, Sitecore has its own Sitecore container repository. So it has all the necessary Sitecore images. For example, it has a production setup and dev setup and any modules we have. For example, PowerShell module, SXA module, or a JSS module, and what are the tools, everything, whatever the Sitecore necessary information which is already available in Sitecore container repository. So with the help of that, we can create the Sitecore environment. And what we are doing is we are customizing, we are creating our code, or we are creating our solution with with mentioning some additional information about our application that we are going to build, and mentioning that in the Docker file and creating that as separate images. And that image is actually creating the real production environment or dev environment for our customers. So that's how we used to do. So taking the vanilla instance from Sitecore, on top of that we are building our application and club everything in a single Docker file, and pushing that into Sitecore repository or private repository, wherever it is, and sending that into CI/CD pipeline and creating the environment. It's a usual process that we are used to do. So deploying that information and creating our own environment, whether it would be a protection or any other lower environment. So we are utilizing that, and the same life cycle will it's a cycle. It's a kind of a same process. So any code changes we are doing it, we are building it, and uploading that through CI/CD pipeline, and against the Docker container, whether it would be production or dev, and we are deploying our ultimate changes over there. So that's how we when we are coming into the Docker world with Sitecore. So this is how we usually works. And so the demo on the today's topic is we in the conventional approach, when we are having a Sitecore package, we can take the Sitecore package through Sitecore application back office called Launchpad. Over there is an option to install it. So we are just uploading a zip file and installing it. So which is pretty easy in conventional manner, and which is not Dockerized, containerized Sitecore environment. Still it is working in some areas, and some manner it will not work. Since the Docker container is immutable, it is very hard to deploy. It's very for now it is very complex for us to deploy the Sitecore packages through Launchpad. So we have an alternative solution for that. I think we'll go to the demo session in order to explain how we are creating it and how we are installing our custom modules over there. So I think Gautam will show you a demo on that.
Yeah, thanks, Prabhu. Thanks for sharing your knowledge on the Docker containers. Let me share my screen. Yeah, are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
So you guys
Yeah.
seeing my Launchpad, right? Like Sitecore instance. Yeah. So yeah, so I hope, like, Prabhu has explained everything about the Docker, like most of the important scenarios that we are handling on the Sitecore Docker. So what I will be going to do is, I already having an instance which is running on the Sitecore Docker, which is nothing but a vanilla instance, which is created out of the Sitecore Next.js. So here I am going to install a package with the test package. We just have the some sample files, like an app config file, which is a configuration files, and the DLL file. And I'm just going to install on the instance and see, like, why we are not able to install, and what we are getting if we are trying to install the package. So I have already uploaded. Just give us some time, so it will take time for installing. So so you're getting the error response for, you're not able to install the package and check for the Sitecore log files. The main issue is here, like, we used to install the package in traditional way like this, like, using the installation wizard. And why it's not installing on the using when you're trying to use on the Docker instance, and why it is failing. As Prabhu said, the Docker container is meant for the mutable, and these are runtime images, and everything is on the read-only mode, so you're not able to push any changes or files into the Docker image registry, and that's why you are not able to install the package. So how we will be resolving this in case if you want to install any package or something? So the other option is would be using converting the package into the Docker image. So to do that, we have certain prerequisites that needs to be installed on our machine. So which includes you need to have obviously you need to have a Docker instance which is running, and you need to have either Docker Content Hub or Docker Hub account, or the Azure Container Registry account, and you need to have a SQL Server installed on your local, so which we'll be using for converting our items into DACPAC file. And then you should have the Sitecore Azure Toolkit installed on your machine, so which actually does a magic of converting our Sitecore package into the image. So these are the prerequisites, which needs to be have in your local machine before you're converting the package into the image. So with that note, I have a one package which I already has in my local, so which does have the uh, yeah. Yeah, so which just has an items and packages, like we the files which needs to be installed. So I'm just going to walk you through how you will be converting this Sitecore package into one image. So to do that, as I mentioned earlier, you should have the uh, Sitecore Azure Toolkit installed on your local machine. So first, what I'll be going to do is I'm going to convert this package into a WDP file, which is we'll be using for Sitecore deployment package. So to do that, I have downloaded Azure Toolkit and then extracted this, and this is the image, sorry, package which I'm going to convert this as a WDP file. That's the first process that we'll be going to do. So these are the, I have a list of commands which I have to run for this converting to the WDP package. I will be sharing that later on this part. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to import PS files and the DLLs which is required for converting that into WDP files. Um, yeah, so I already when you're running this converting to WDP files, you have to make sure you are running it in PowerShell 5.5 version. 7 version is not supported yet, so you have to use a PowerShell 5 version. So make sure like you have 5 versions. When you're running, you have 5 versions. So I'm going to import modules. So which is nothing but it's a part of Sitecore Azure Toolkit packages. So you'll be having all these files when you are downloading the Azure Toolkit packages. And then I'm going to use the DL. And this is a command which will instruct the package, ask this Azure repository, like Azure Sitecore Azure Toolkit to convert this zip package into the files, WDP files. So when I hit on run, so it will convert the zip package into the files. So this is a path. So I'm using the counter at zip, and the destination would be the same. Like I don't have a counter for folder. I just created now. So if I go and see here, so I'll be having a zip folder created out of this. So what I'm going to do is I will be unzipping it. So you have whatever the items that you have on your package, right? So it will be converted as a DATPAC file. So which is nothing but it creates as a database file, SQL Server database file, and then contents all the files that you have. It will be created under the website with the same folder structure, like in app config, include whatever that you have. It will be created with that. So I have these DLLs with this here, and some of the Sitecore modules and app config files which I have here. So now this is the first step. We will be for converting our package into the WDP file, and then from here we need to convert this into the Sitecore image. Like on slide number 2, if I remember correctly, slide number 2, Prabhu was showing like we'll be converting that on the Docker terminology. We'll be converting this into the image file. So to do that, so I already have this module file with the files. So I have an Sitecore when you are converting the package into an image. So Sitecore has set of folder structure you need to follow. So the one among is like you have to create as a module. So the package should be it's a parent folder would be a module, and with that module you will be have to have it on the CM. If the files calls for the CM, you said then you have to put up a CM, and if it is of a DB, then you have to do it on a DB. So I'm just need it on the CM. So I'll be converting adding this on the only CM. So these are the files which will be going into the image, converting as an image, and then whatever the DB items. So I have both items on master and core. So I'm having this, and when you are converting this, when it is initially generated, it will be just a master and core. So when you use the same file for creating as an image, it will be you will be able to create an image, but when you're trying to spin up with the instance, you will not you won't be seeing an image items on the Sitecore content tree. The reason being is Sitecore only accept the particular specific terms, so which should be you have to like you have to add a Sitecore in before the core database and Sitecore before the master database. If you don't add that, it will not be considered as an database, and it will not be taken for when you are spinning up the instance. So I have added that onto Sitecore, and then yeah, this is a Docker file which which instruct. This is a yeah, this is a Docker file which instruct the Docker to convert this particular files into the image. So what I will be doing is, so I'm going to create this package for the Windows server. So I'm in, I'm taking the Nano server, which is a simple version of a Windows. So I'm going to use this, importing that. And what I'm saying is copy the current folder into the same folder structure. So this is the simple command which will make this files into a Docker image. So once it is done, you have created a Docker files, then go to your command prompt, and then what I'm going to run here is like I'm going to build this. So in the Docker terminology, we Docker files, we have a terminologies like for the build, all those things. So I'm going to build this as an image with the tag as connector and version 1.0, and informing the command to use a current root folder. So what it does is it will build a new image. So this is a container which I am running on my local. If you see, I don't have an image which named as connector. Like I have an RWS connector, but it doesn't have the connector with 1.0.0. Yeah. So this is again I pulled it from the my local, and it is no more using. So when I run this command, it will build the image. So if you see, it is successful. And when I go to see the Docker, you see just created now. So this is a container which is which I created now. So if you want to see like what are the files that are listed here, then you can use Docker run -lt to see what are the files inside, like to make sure you have all the files inside the image. So you have to use the Docker run -it, and then the container ID. So the container ID you can copy it from here. Yeah, so you can inspect on the content files. So if you list out the directories, you'll be having a modules which I have created, like this is a root module. So since you'll be having these files, so if you want to inspect it, so change into module. So you'll be having the CMDB, all the files. So this is for just for your inspecting whether you have a proper images built for this container with the command. So next what we will be doing is, so we just we have created an image. So we need to if we are let's say for example if you are running it in locally, it is fine. But if you are have to share your image into a team, into the team, or to someone else, you have to host it on the Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry. So I'm using the Azure Container Registry. So with that, and also like you have to connect your Azure accounts. You should have a account for hosting your Azure Content Registry. So those are prerequisites. I'll be sharing the article, the whole documentation with that. So I'm going to inform, run a command. So saying that like, take this. Yeah. So I'm going to say like, copy this tagged image container 101 and put it as create a image repository as 101. So if I go for my Azure accounts, so if you see this is the repository I'm using. So I don't have any image called container 101. So then I'll be running this command. So tag is created. Once it is created, then you have to push your image to the Azure Content Registry. Okay, let it run. So once it is done, it will be uploaded to the registry, and I'm going to use my the one image which I have built it earlier. So what I the instance which I'm already running. So if you see on the image, I have uh, items which is meant for which is inside the DB, and then a list of files which I have to deploy it on the CM. So I have first of all I need to inform my image, like on the command I have to include that in an image to include that files into the container. So what I will be doing is, so I'll be going for the CM service first. Yeah. So this is CM service. So I'll be adding this as a arguments, and then this is a URL where I'll be downloading an image. So what it does is, so you will be having each Docker, each file for Docker file for each containers, and then you will be passing this as an argument, and you will be extracting and defining what it needs to be done. So I'm adding this AWS container as an argument, and then if I go for the Docker CM Docker file, so I'm extracting this as an AWS connector and informing here like extract from module CM content and put it here. The same way for how I will be extracting the items, so it will be added as here. So AWS connector, and then from module DB, and then I will be adding it as on the connector. So this is a source like which will be from the image, and this is a destination that you will be creating for the container registries. Sorry, container images. So once it is done, then your command is to spin up the instance. So I already added this and spin up the instance. So here you see like the command had created a connector, and then you can use the same for using it. So now after I added, if I go to here, so what are the list I have added? So these are the files which I have into the folders, basically the converted images. So I need to check whether these files are created. So if I go to the Docker, refresh, yeah, files. This is my CM, and I'm going to input triple W. Yeah. So you see these files are created. So this is an SDL connector.config. Like I have renamed it, and then so if I can show it on the DLLs. So I have the SDL DLLs here. Connector.dll. It's hard to find, but yeah, the DLLs are everything is present. And also if you see the items, which as a part of items, it will be available here on the content trees. I don't think so. It's available here. I think it's not showing up here, but yeah, this is how you will be converting this packages into an image, and then deploying into the Sitecore content, Sitecore images. And furthermore, like to know more about this, the whole thing, so you can check here. You have all the, where is the chat? Yeah. So you can find everything including from the prerequest. You will be having all the details here in this article. Yeah, that's it. So any questions?
Hello everyone. The floor is open for question and answer. Do you have any questions for Gautam and Prabhu? I don't think we have any questions for Gautam and Prabhu. So I think this is a very good topic in Sitecore world and very trending one. So maybe everyone will need some time to digest all the knowledge that was shared across. And maybe I believe like if after going through all the things and trying it on their local, if they have any questions, they might reach out to you guys. I would like to say thank you so much for sharing all this trending knowledge with the group and the community and helping us to like cope up with the trending technologies.
Thanks a lot, Rohan, and thanks,
Thank
and the whole entire group of SUT Pune for giving this opportunity for sharing your knowledge. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.